Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the vigilant riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. The Prime Minister is always taking his frustrations over his own failures out on other people, like his latest property confiscation law. He calls it a buyback, as though he sold the private property to us in the first place. Maybe he's just going to return the GST instead of full compensation. But the travesty runs much deeper. Sidearms for trappers, commercial security companies. Of course, it's okay for Trudeau to have protection for himself, but what about the rest of us? Perhaps it's his godlike self-image wherein everything we have is due to his divine benevolence. Throughout his 7 years of ruining Canada, Trudeau, in effect, has been handing out get-out-of-jail-free cards to murderers, rapists, and thieves. Make that serial killers and rapists. Now the Supreme Court says serial killers like Basil Barutsky and Dylan Millard can apply for parole after only 25 years. He's overturning mandatory minimum sentence legislation, enabling dangerous offenders to commit heinous crimes again. This means murderers don't necessarily have to do time in prison. According to StatsCan, crimes involving firearms have gone up by 81% since Trudeau's soft-on-crime approach became the law of the land. Instead of punishing violent criminals, Trudeau's latest targets, yet again, are the people who abide by the rules. Earlier this week, amid great fanfare, he announced regulations that had an immediate effect. Not one regulation applies to people who acquire their property illegally. These regulations are slated to take effect before the bill, C-21, works its way through the legislative process. That's putting the cart before the horse, like imposing a tax before it's even voted on. Trudeau must, at the very least, buy all targeted items for sale from the vendors at sticker prices. Earlier this week, I met with the Ukrainian MPs who had been given leave from the front lines to attend a conference with elected representatives from all NATO countries. We learned that many citizen soldiers' only defensive gear was the fabric of their uniforms. Some don't even have that. The Ukrainian MPs were pleading for defense equipment to help their brothers and sisters in arms to whom they were returning after the meeting. Now, some of you have told me the brutality of the confiscation would be eased somewhat if they were being given to the people fending off Putin in Ukraine. But we were advised that military-grade defense equipment is what's needed, and the banned items do not qualify as military-grade. The only ones being assaulted are the ones to whom the new law applies. Police and soldiers use them on their own time and at their personal expense at a licensed facility to keep their skills sharp because they don't receive the adequate practice time on the job. So then, why is Trudeau banning these personal, legally owned possessions? He doesn't like the way they look. With Trudeau, it's all about appearance. The other part of C-21 is the freeze on lawful sales of personal property instead of a siege on smuggling. Confiscation of personal possessions is the perfect way for Trudeau to set a precedent for confiscation of other privately owned property, real property, like your home. Why is it they want to know the value of your primary residence on your income tax return? Real property like your farm, your cottage, if you're lucky enough to have one. Remember, you'll own nothing and be happy. There is an exception to the law. If you're an elite competitor in the sport, the demon of confiscation passes by your door. But how do everyday Canadians get to become elite if they're not allowed to possess the equipment to hone their skills to become elite athletes? The average person doesn't pay attention to the news. They hear snippets on the radio or see part of a video clip on TV. So even when a tragedy happens in the United States, the average Joe thinks it's happening in Canada. The paid-off media replay the video clip every 20 minutes, so Canadian viewers become traumatized, not realizing the incident has taken place in the United States, where their laws are not strict like ours. Where here in Canada, you have to take a safety course, where you have to have a background check extending over your lifetime, where your spouse has to agree in writing, where a background check is done on you every 24 hours. Trudeau knows this, and even though the laws in Canada that Canada has in place are already severe, Trudeau exploits the victims of these tragedies and imposes even harsher restrictions on law-abiding Canadians. You see, it's easier to confiscate property from law-abiding Canadians than to tackle certain smugglers. C-21 is not about saving lives. It's about setting a legal precedent with which to seize your property. Don't believe me? Just ask the Renfrew County landowners or the Ontario Landowners Association. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant, wishing you a good night.